Hello and welcome to the Open Book channel. My name is Oleander, your designated open book, and this is where I share my journey as an author, talk about the craft of writing, the business of being a content creator, and occasionally review really good books. In a previous video, I talked about the standards of indie publishing and how I found that some houses and authors' presentations online didn't match their professionalism. And I ended the video with no definitive answer on whether standards for writing even can or should exist at this point. I'm not really here to make rules, I'm here to discuss their viability. And because of that, I've been thinking about indie publishing versus traditional publishing and why there was so much contention around self publishing existing when traditional was the norm. And my thesis statement is that it wasn't always just a matter of pompous elevation, but that it was also a matter of not wanting to depreciate the industry, which I can agree with. And now, with the rise of AI, those older mentalities, which we've been condemning for the last couple decades, are starting to feel more appealing. Once again, we want to gatekeep the space, but let's start from the beginning. I'm going to play devil's advocate, explain a bit why it is in some ways fair to want to gatekeep creative spaces for professionals, and then expand now to the complications that not doing so causes creatives trying to earn a living. Again, in regards to AI. In previous videos, I've talked about how I oppose the arbitrary standards that come with the territory of calling oneself a writer. It's not just that being able to call oneself a writer is gatekept by an agreed upon amount of practices, it's also that being a writer demands dedication, which is both somehow generalized and harshly criticized, even though we are not all capable of fitting into that same equation, aka writing every day, selling however many books a quarter, etc. And as much as I find the whole culture and community around what qualifies someone as a writer in the first place rather toxic in that regard, I can't deny that a certain level of gatekeeping feels valid. For two reasons. One, being the landscape of self-pub versus trad-pub. The initial conflict between the two means of publishing was a matter of trying not to devalue the profession of publishing. If self-pub works were really going to be lower quality, as a matter of fact, because simply less people were working on them to polish them to a certain level, then it was in the interest of those that treat writing professionally, traditionally, or as an art to oppose easy access to the publishing space. But, of course, that doesn't work because we should all know by now, with the state of the publishing industry in the 2020s, that a self published work can be 10 times more amazing than a traditional one, and the visibility a book gets can just be a matter of hype and chance, not its quality. But let's be fair, the traditional's response to indie publishing makes sense. In another video, I said if we want writing to be a profession, in some way we have to have standards. We just currently have no way of enforcing them. But you also wouldn't just let anyone be a brain surgeon because being a doctor is a profession and you earn it. And some of us want writing to be our profession, but everything is too messed up already. Diving deeper into this doctor analogy, the back alley, illegal doctors, give the certified ones in hospitals a bad name every time they do a hack job because they call themselves a doctor. The power is in the word, but obviously hospitals have no way of stopping them. That's much like small presses that don't have the experience to edit their books. Publishing something with the same expectation as a traditionally published book hurts the name of being an indie writer overall. It devalues the title writer. Now, however, that analogy expands to include AI writers. The second reason that gatekeeping writing feels kind of valid is that if you're half-assing writing, then you're taking up space of those who want to be whole-assing it. I know the more positive perspective is that you're not competing with your fellow creators. We're not each other's enemies, and we need to spend our energy supporting each other rather than tearing each other down. And that's true, but I disagree that it's not a competitive space. There's only so many paid opportunities in the writing sphere available, and they're dwindling by the year. And no matter what way you look at it, when a reader is browsing for something to read, your book is inherently in competition with everything else in its genre. Readers only have so much time and money to invest, and it's a constant battle to obtain those resources over someone else. Think about it this way. Say you write a poem once a year for fun. Don't take it too seriously and decide to submit it to a collection that pays. You get in, but someone who actively writes poems and submits poems on the daily gets shortlisted and doesn't get in. In a way, the hobbyist has now filled the position that would have benefited the professional, and as much as that is a loss that the professional poet needs to accept, like, sucks to suck, bro, The hobbyist is also inadvertently blocking access to positions from people taking writing more seriously. Is this anyone's fault? Absolutely not. The hobbyist isn't doing it intentionally to be rude, that's just the way that things turn out, but in writing, there is a limited amount of space available. The industry isn't big enough to support people genuinely pursuing it and casuals dipping their toes in. Anyone half assing it and filling a position is, technically, taking opportunity away from someone relying on that submission payout to pay their rent. As much as the writing industry is a matter of standards, sometimes more so, it's a matter of availability. Your writing could be amazing, but they're not looking for that niche right now. The market isn't right, it's oversaturated, or your story fits the anthology perfectly, but they've got too many flash fics selected already and they actually can't even give yours a chance. Availability is the name of the game, and it's understandable that casual dabbling in the realm of writing is frowned upon by those who want to take it seriously. Casual dabbling hinders them because sometimes it's not about being good, it's just about being first or lucky. I've come up with a much better analogy for this and why I felt so devalued and gave up on the idea of ever being an artist for profit. Let's say you're a digital artist. You paint a beautiful portrait of any given famous video game character. Zelda. Let's go with Zelda. You paint a stylized portrait of Zelda, and you use this portrait for various things. You put it on a t-shirt for $20, a mug for $10, and sell those on Redbubble, and you make it available as a wallpaper people can download for their computer for $5. But then there's this hobby artist. They also make a portrait of Zelda. You want to tell yourself it's not better than yours, but they're honestly just different styles, and the quality is roughly equal. You respect this hobbyist, tip your hat to their skills, but then, bum bum bum, they make their portrait of Zelda into a computer background wallpaper and put it out for free. Now, this in and of itself doesn't seem like a bad thing. If you're a hobbyist and you just want to share your art with everyone else who wants it, that's really altruistic. But at the same time, they have put themselves in the competitive market of art and they have devalued the art of another artist. Because both works are of the same grade and quality, potential buyers are going to lean towards downloading the free one and think nothing of the artist that is trying to make a living off their art, who spent hours upon hours of labor to make it and expected the gain of a measly $5 payoff just to have that opportunity taken by a hobbyist, essentially to have their customers stolen. Because the hobbyist is doing it for fun and expects nothing of their labor, in a way they devalue the labor of everyone making a similar product, but actually expecting adequate pay for it. This is kind of why we live in a culture where people don't value or expect to compensate creatives for their work. It's a lot in part because we can get similar value or less, because the providers of that alternative aren't monetizing and therefore devaluing a whole medium. And another part is that creativity in general started as a luxury in society and has become so abundant in relation to not needing to be hunter-gatherers anymore that it feels valueless now. And, with AI. Anyway, back to our analogy, because it can get even worse. After the hobbyist puts out their free background piece, some scoundrel, we will call them McScammy, downloads it for themselves, but then uploads it to Redbubble on a mug for $3 and a shirt for $5. McScammies are everywhere. They will take whatever art they can get their hands on and try to turn a profit. They will even take copyrighted art with watermarks on it, erase them to steal them. But in this case, the hobbyist doesn't care and will not pursue its theft. I mean, they never profited from it anyway. As much as McScammies are terrible and plague real artists, sometimes even posing as them and actively stealing their market by selling their art, this McScammy is not going to be stopped. Customers are going to buy the mugs and t-shirts that they put on Redbubble for a lower price than the genuine artist mug and t-shirt in the competitive comparative market. Because McScammy doesn't care how low a profit they're making a profit for doing nothing but stealing and reselling. And so, again, here we have a professional artist getting nothing for their work, although they are charging a reasonable price because hobbyists and scammers have devalued the market and they cannot technically compete and lower their prices to the same if they want to afford to be able to live. The artist starves, as it were, because there is only so much availability and demand in a market for, in this case, Zelda portraits. And this situation, this analogy, this mentality, all comes back around to writing. How many writers can be taken on by any given agent, and how many agents are available? how many books can be published by a company, and what's their availability to care about that release amongst their other publications. On and on and on. What about the price of some writers selling their ebook for 99 cents, which is the minimum that Amazon will allow, versus someone who genuinely wants to make a living as a writer who has to set theirs at $5 and hope to God that they'll even sell a dozen? As a blind customer, it's hard to argue for taking a chance on $5 instead of just buying the 99-cent one, because the standard of writing is non existent and technically it's a fair gamble. Price doesn't determine quality anymore. So you can say that I understand why the title writer is so gatekept. I get it. I feel it too. It makes me a little self conscious to be aligned with people that intentionally oversaturate the market with uninspired hot trash. I also see the other side of how exclusive and exclusionary the practice of trying to protect our creative field are to everyone with potential that wants into it, but feels like it's too gatekept to try. You could say that the more that you try to be a professional writer, the more you should favor the act of gatekeeping to maintain the reputation and opportunities of the field. The more serious you are about your work, the more serious you'll demand other people be too. I guess you could say my perspective on the writing community and gatekeeping calling oneself a writer and the practice of publishing writing has changed now that I myself am trying to pursue writing as a career. When I was a teenager and just an aspiring author with no published works under my belt, I used to find all the rules and gatekeeping in the writing community really overwhelming. But the truth of the matter is, I was just focusing on the wrong things. It doesn't matter whether you write every day or how much you read. It does matter how you present yourself as an author and whether you put your work through forms of quality control. So I hope you found my little dive into being a devil's advocate for gatekeeping rather than against it offered an interesting bit of insight. The more you've written and engaged in the community, do you feel as though your opinions on gatekeeping and the community standards has changed since you were just an aspiring author? Or have you always felt the same? Like I said, the more that I write and more I market myself as an author, the more I see the value in keeping the space tightly curated. Not that any of us can enforce anything on anyone other than ourselves, but if we practice what we preach, then that's at least a step in the right direction, right? In a world of AI pumping out content and reviews that can be bought and sold, I do find myself yearning a bit for 2 decades back when the internet was young and I had faith that any book I picked up would be good. But I guess all books weren't that good, they were more problematic and less diverse. Maybe it's just that when I was a kid in public school, aspiring to grow up and be a writer, I felt like there was a tried and true path to accomplish that, and it wasn't the pipe dream that it is now. Let me know how you feel about the state of gatekeeping in the publishing industry throughout the decades in the comments. Do you see the value in gatekeeping creative spaces, or is the idea of it just futile? Trying to impose standards is too subjective and often hurts more than it could ever help, because bad people always end up using that power for some crappy agenda or another. But I thought it was relevant to bring up the stigmatization indies felt by traditional publishers now that we're all yelling into the void that AI writers are not writers. I don't think they are either. But the community has never been so unified in wanting to keep this type of writing and production out of the space. Access fully denied. And that felt relevant to mention. We have been here before. But this time around, the opposition against AI writing is even more valid. AI is stealing work to train itself. It is directly serving as a cheaper substitute, taking money out of the pockets of creators, and damaging the environment to do it, which is the cherry on top. Are we truly justified in gatekeeping our creative spaces this time? Yes, absolutely, I think so. But that's my opinion, so feel free to share yours. Anyway, as always, thank you for watching. If you want to support me or this channel, you can find links to my socials in the description below. Thanks again, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.